10. Frostbite in Canada. An Australian woman in Canada was not prepared for just how brutal the Canadian winter can be. The woman, identified as Emma Quirk, got so drunk that she fell asleep outside a bar in Canada in the middle of the winter and woke up with frostbite. A very nasty case of it. The accident happened in December of 2014. Emma was in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, and got so drunk that she blacked out. She had already been in Canada for 4 years and was no stranger to the winters. Yet she strolled out of that bar at 2:30 a.m., shut her eyes, and fell asleep in the treacherous cold, something that would typically be a death sentence. Emma had told her friends that she was going out to have a smoke, then vanished without a jacket or gloves when the temperature outside was -22 degrees Fahrenheit. She wasn't found until 3 hours later, curled in a ball with purple fingers outside a random nursing home. A nurse told her the best case scenario would be that she kept her fingers. The nurse said the worst case would be that she lost both hands. After several days in the hospital, her fingers ballooned to ridiculous proportions. The blisters so big they literally looked like balloons. But then the blisters popped. The pain began to subside, and her hands were able to heal. It looked worse than if she'd stuck both hands in the oven. A miracle she didn't leave the hospital with hooks instead of hands. 9. Sleeping in the cockpit. In August of 2022, something unusual happened on a Boeing 737 in Ethiopia. Not one, but both pilots fell asleep in the cockpit of the 737, resulting in them missing their landing. Both pilots were shocked into awareness by an alarm that started to blare because they were about to crash. Ethiopian Airlines flight ET-343 was scheduled to land at 6:20 a.m. in Addis Ababa, the Ethiopian capital. It was flying out of Khartoum in Sudan. The trip wasn't even that long. It's only a 2-hour flight from Sudan to Ethiopia. But these pilots must have been extremely sleepy. Air traffic controllers in Ethiopia realized something was wrong when the jet, rather than descending upon approach, continued to cruise at 37,000 feet, 11,778 meters. When the air traffic controllers attempted to contact the pilots, they received nothing. That's because both pilots were in dreamland. The plane overshot the runway, autopilot was disconnected, and the aviators woke up to a blaring alarm. They were able to make a loop and approach the runway, landing the aircraft only 25 minutes late. They landed safely and nobody was injured, but it was a pretty close call. If the alarm hadn't gone off, who knows where that airplane would have landed. Both pilots have since been suspended pending an investigation. Aviation analyst Alex Machuris blamed the incident on something called pilot fatigue, in which overwhelmed pilots get so sleepy they pass out at the controls. 8. Eaten by a bear. Julian Gauthier was a musician who fell asleep in the Canadian wilderness and was eaten by a bear. It's just one of those things that can happen when you're out in the forests of Canada. The musician, who is described by loved ones as sensitive, generous, and talented, was visiting the extremely remote Northwest Territories. He was there to record sounds of nature for a musical project he was doing. The 44-year-old musician went into the wilderness with a friend. They traveled along the Mackenzie River during August of 2019, near the settlement of Tulita. Everything seemed to be going just swimmingly until Julian passed out. He fell asleep, so did his friend, and then a grizzly bear dragged him out of his tent and into the wild. When Julian's friend realized he was gone, she sent a distress beacon. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police soon arrived via helicopter and searched for where Julian may have gone. Sure enough, they found Julian's body where the bear had abandoned it. As for the bear, we have no idea what happened to it. So far as anyone knows, the bear is still stalking the wilderness, waiting for the next tourist to fall asleep in their flimsy tent. 7. Sleepwalking nightmare. In December of 2011, Charlene Ferrero was discovered in Newton Lake, New Jersey. The 54-year-old woman may have taken a walk early on Sunday morning straight into the lake and drowned. The Oakland Police Department ruled her death an accidental drowning. According to her friends, Charlene was notorious for sleepwalking. Only a week and a half before her untimely demise, Charlene was caught by her next-door neighbor doing the exact same thing. She walked out of her apartment, knocked on her neighbor's door, and said, "The people at table 2 ordered the eggs." Charlene was sleepwalking through a dream in which she was working in a restaurant as a waitress. Her close friends say sleepwalking was something she struggled with frequently, but not something anyone had imagined would bring about her death. Sleepwalking is a form of parasomnia, a kind of sleep affliction that about 10% of Americans suffer. 10% of Americans report erratic behavior at night, from walking in their sleep, becoming violent, or having a feast while completely knocked out. In most cases, people who sleepwalk simply wander around their houses. But Charlene Ferrero managed to escape the confines of her home and wander out into the cold night. Dr. David Rappaport from the sleep medicine program at the New York University School of Medicine called the case extreme but not impossible. There were reports that Charlene was spotted driving her car Saturday night, and that her vehicle was parked awkwardly in front of her apartment the morning she was missing. She may have gone for a drive while asleep, then got out of her vehicle and walked straight into the lake and drowned. There's no real way of knowing for certain what happened. Scientists don't even know what causes sleepwalking, but have suggested it could be worsened by things like stress and insomnia. There isn't even a way to tell if Charlene woke up when she hit the lake, or if she continued to sleep until life left her body. 6. Asleep in the wrong house. A drunk man walked into the wrong house and fell asleep. The man from Scotland was abruptly woken up by an astounded couple after he wandered into their house, plopped down on their sofa, and passed out. The hungover man woke to find himself being interrogated by a pair he had never seen before. They wanted to know what he was doing in their house, but he just wanted to know where he was and what had happened. The partygoer had gotten a little too drunk the night before in Glasgow, back in 2019. He was so wasted that he strolled into the wrong house, helped himself to a pot of noodles, and then made a bed for himself on the sofa. He was lucky the owners of the home found the accident as hilarious as he did. The couple, when they asked what he was doing there, were greeted with the answer of, "What are you talking about? I was here last night for the party." But there was no party. The couple just happened to leave their door unlocked at the wrong time. In the end, it made for a hilarious story. The couple offered the hungover Scotsman a cup of tea to help his raging headache, and he posted their interaction on social media. It's just lucky they were so understanding, or he could have found himself in a much worse situation. 5. Straight into the river. On that Tuesday night in October 2022, a woman in Vermont fell asleep and drove into a river. Vermont state troopers say a 37-year-old woman from Londonderry was traveling along VT Route 30 when she made a huge mistake. She fell asleep, went off the road, drove up the embankment beside the road, got some air, and landed in the water. This was Dukes of Hazzard stuff. Only she was asleep the entire time. The police don't think there was any impairment involved. The woman wasn't drunk or stoned on illegal drugs. She was simply tired, and she fell asleep at an unimaginably bad time. When the police arrived at the river just shy of 12 a.m., they found her car completely upside down and flooded. Luckily for the sleepy driver, she had her seatbelt on. Even though her car was totaled, she walked away without any injury. She wasn't even banged up, only shaken and embarrassed at her midnight blunder. Her 2015 Toyota Tundra was annihilated. It had to be towed out of the river, and the woman had to get a ride home. 4. Sleeping in the trash. In Tallahassee, a pair of men who had never met or had any relation to one another died the same terrible way. Both men fell asleep in dumpsters in 2016 and were crushed to death in the mouth of a trash compactor. William Norris and Anthony Todd were found 2 months apart. Both men deposited at the Leon County Waste Transfer Station. The local sheriff's office says there was likely no foul play involved. Both deaths were purely accidental, a total coincidence. One of the men was a longtime transient who lived on the streets of Tallahassee. The other arrived more recently. It's believed Anthony Todd, only a month from turning 44, may have had a seizure while sleeping in the dumpster. He couldn't revive himself before he was picked up by the trash truck. He wasn't discovered until a bulldozer worker at the waste transfer station saw his legs sticking out from a pile of garbage. The worker first thought it was a mannequin, but soon realized it was flesh and blood he was looking at. The other victim, William Norris, had a long history of alcohol abuse and interactions with the police. He was likely hiding in the dumpster because it was raining the night before the trash trucks came. He was discovered at the same transfer station by a heavy equipment operator moving the trash around. Police were able to identify him by the driver's license discovered in his pocket. 3. A crime at Whataburger. In February of 2023, a man in Houston, Texas stole a car and fell asleep. What happened sounds like something from a comedy skit. It was about 11 o'clock at night when George Ponce, 25 years old, arrived at the Whataburger. He broke into a car, stole a credit card that was hiding inside, then went to buy food with it. He took the Whataburger back into the vehicle that he had just broken into, ate the food, and then fell asleep. Imagine the surprise of the owner when they returned to their car to find a strange man passed out and covered in crumbs in the driver's seat. George never tried to drive away. He didn't take the credit card to try and purchase some expensive items. He just ate the food, passed out, and was woken up by the police. After he was taken to jail, George was charged with burglary of a motor vehicle and credit card abuse. 2. Tiffanydishs DUI. In January of 2022, Tiffany Haddish was arrested for falling asleep at the wheel while under the influence. The Girls Trip star, who was 42 at the time, was arrested by Georgia police at about 2:30 in the morning. She allegedly fell asleep at the wheel and was discovered dozing off in the middle of the road. She was so wasted, allegedly, that she passed out before she even made it home. The police initially received a phone call that a driver on the road was dozing off. When the police arrived on the scene, they found the comedian in a delirious state with her car drifting into the yard of somebody's house in Peachtree City. She was promptly arrested and transported to the Fayette County Jail. The police believed Tiffany was smoking reefer, something the stand-up comic had been open about doing. By 6:30 that same morning, Tiffany posted bond and was out of jail. And since then, she's been fairly open about her DUI arrest, even speaking on Jimmy Fallon. But even though she was arrested, we still haven't seen Tiffany face any kind of criminal prosecution. 1. Helen Rhodess' last flight. Helen Rhodess was relocating from Hong Kong back to the United Kingdom when the unimaginable happened. The British mother of two was on a long flight from Asia to England when suddenly, in front of her family, she fell into a deep sleep. On August 5th, 2022, she was discovered unresponsive in her seat. It was just a few hours after she and her husband and their children took off from Hong Kong along with a family friend. Everyone thought Helen was passed out and enjoying the long flight asleep, but she was in fact dying. Despite everyone's hardest efforts, Helen was unable to be woken up. This all unfolded in front of a plane full of people and Helen's distraught family. What's really crazy is that Helen wasn't immediately dead. She fell asleep, then she couldn't be woken up. Her family tried desperately to wake her, but she lay asleep on the airplane for 8 hours before she finally died without any warning. The cause of Helen's death was never determined. It was a freak medical accident and a mystery no one seems able to solve. Helen had been living in Hong Kong for the last 15 years with her family. She was perfectly healthy and totally normal. She got on that flight just as she had gotten on plenty of flights before. But once Helen closed her eyes and fell asleep, it was like the Sandman took her soul. She couldn't wake up, and then her body simply quit. Would you rather fall asleep behind the wheel or pass out in a hot tub and wake up boiling like a lobster? Let us know in the comments, and thanks for watching. Be sure to hit subscribe if you haven't yet, and come back soon for more videos from the channel.